Welcome back to Turn Down for What, your source for EV news and updates. Like and subscribe for more content like this episode. Let's dive on in.
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? Another day.
Another episode.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So last week, we put a couple videos up on our YouTube channel, kind of reviewing the Chevy Silverado EV. I wanted to apologize for all of those who commented on the terrible audio quality. We were using a new mic and it just did not work appropriately. We have now since fixed the issue, and hopefully the next review will be better. But we made lemonade out of the lemons, and it was an overall, I think, good walkthrough. But it was a great experience to be able to get in the Chevy Silverado, get to drive it. We took it all the way to Raleigh and back, and got to take it around town a little bit, just to kind of see what it would be like to have a vehicle with the range that was featured in that vehicle. I mean, obviously, with what it is, it's a gigantic battery, lots of things to kind of unpack there, which we talked a little bit in those review episodes. But today, we wanted to bring on a very close friend of the podcast, Sergio, coming back and bringing in his expertise as he sits in his very own Chevy Silverado, and maybe not have had some issues, and just kind of wanted to get a real driver's experience with the ownership of the vehicle and what that's been like, and also kind of dialogue about some of the things that maybe we didn't discuss while we had it. So welcome back, Sergio. Thank you for being here. Let's get kicked off.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I love the show. It's always fun to be part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always great to have you and your wealth of knowledge and wealth of EVs that you own and get to experience for all of us. And we get to pick your brain with, the 36 different vehicles that you have. So
He's our personal Jay Leno. Every time we're like, what vehicle are we going to talk about? Who's got one of these, Sergio?
Can we get a channel started called like a sub brand of our podcast called Sergio's Garage, and like EV reviews? But yeah, so obviously you're sitting in your Chevy Silverado. When did you get it, and how has the experience been?
So I got my Chevy Silverado a few months ago. I think I'm at the 6 month now. I think I got it in when did I get this thing? That's the problem. When you buy too many cars, you forget which ones you bought when you bought it. I think I bought this one in July. I'm pretty positive I bought it in July, maybe. But I've had this one for a few months. It's what was the question? Besides the when I got
When
it?
did you get it, and how has the experience been for the first few months of ownership?
So the experience has been pretty interesting. I got the truck. I left it parked because I was on my transition of moving across the country. So I left it in California at a friend's house for a month, just sitting out in front of her house because I just couldn't deal with it while shifting across the country. But left it there. Once I got in the truck and got back, it had like less than 100 miles on it because I just bought it. It was fresh. But immediately I started getting leveling issues. My automatic suspension wouldn't automatically lower itself when I put the vehicle in park. It wouldn't raise itself sometimes, and kept getting different alerts on the screen talking about my suspension was having some issues. Called the dealership. They said it was a known firmware bug. Just leave it. It'll once it gets an OTA, it'll be fine. So I just dealt with it. Drove the car up from Southern California up to Monterey. Had a nice drive. Had a couple of the leveling issues. The range is just insane on this thing. Then after that, I drove it all the way to Virginia. So have had plenty of time in the seat. Have had some range tests, and then when I got to Virginia, I started having all types of issues.
All types of issues. I guess we'll tap into that in a minute. So obviously, Chris, you have something on your tongue. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, because you've driven across the country a number of times, and how different was it to have that extra range? Because that's got to be a changer, whether it's wind, how many did you track how many fewer stops you had to do to get across the country that way? And then curiously, because now Chevy has access to the Tesla network, but they can't charge as well as the truck can. How was that decision made? Like, how do you decide? Do I go Tesla? Do I go EA? Because you're trading off potential speed for reliability in that case.
Great question, and that brings up a great point, because you're right. The charging speeds for the Tesla chargers, you're going to max out at 250. I mean, yeah, 250 on those. I At the time I did the road trip, we were not unlocked yet for GM to be able to utilize the chargers. So GM actually waited before releasing access, because what they wanted to do was have the pay-in app for using the supercharger network. So they didn't want their users to have to download the Tesla app and then activate the chargers that way. We can actually activate the chargers through the My Chevrolet app. So that was their biggest delay. So and that was
It keeps the data loyal to them.
yes. And
Yeah.
so that's what I talked to somebody at GM, and so that's what he was explaining to me, because I was like, why'd you guys drag your feet on taking so long? They were like, oh, we didn't want to be like Ford and just push it out there so people have to download their app. We want to keep all our data to our, yeah, so 100%. But it made a huge difference. I could tell you, when I mapped up from Monterey, California to drive to Norfolk, Virginia, the car told me I needed 10 stops. And it was crazy because it was a little over 3,200 miles. And just watching where it wanted me to stop, how it wanted me to stop, I took 40 all the way out. It's awesome having this amount of range, but it sucks when your bladder can't have that much range. So there was several times where I wanted to continue pushing, but my bladder said, absolutely not, you're going to stop, which then made me feel like I was wasting time stopping. I was like, I almost felt like I should have like bought some diapers, because I wanted to keep going so I could like be as efficient as possible. But no, it was pretty amazing to be able to just truck along and have that massive range. It huge difference as far as driving the Lightning, driving the any of the other cars. It was completely different experience.
I
So-
think it's interesting to hear you talk about that, because I'm just getting ready to route plan for my trip down to Legoland in a couple weeks. And I think, I don't mind that idea that it can outrange, your physical needs, because one of the things that I've got the opposite, being in a standard range. I'm almost working backwards. I'm like, okay, here's my destination. How far can I go backwards? Okay, that's my last stop there for charging. How far does that get me with the grapevine? There's that. So my truck is dictating where I stop. And then whereas you're able to have your body dictate where you stop. And so you've got so many options. Whereas I've sometimes got to make a decision between that stop if I stop there, that cuts an entire charging stop out of my trip. But there's no amenities, and my wife and kids don't have facilities. But if I go, I can't make it to this one that does. And if I stop at this one that's earlier, I can't make it all the way. So it changes the way you road trip to a more traditional ability, I think, because when your body is what's stopping you, you can really change fundamentally your choices. Whereas my truck is causing me to make choices that you don't have to make. So I love hearing that.
With our trip, we saw that, and I commented on the video. The range, that it was a 5-hour trip, and the range got us all the way there, and we charged while we were at the facility, and he got us all the way back. So we stopped once or twice on the way there and on the way back at random spots, once for lunch, once for coffee, once to use the bathroom, and didn't charge at any of those locations because of the massive amount of range. And we talked about it just a hair before we came live on the podcast. But you also, I think, had mentioned it in the CEO roundtable episode that we had you on a couple months ago. You were kind of explaining Jim Farley's comments on the range. I'll let you tap back into that, but I mean, it is a valid point for, there's a balance, I think, between your range, Chris, of like interstate 220 and 420 on the interstate going 80 miles an hour. There's a comfortable balance there that can be struck for efficiency, cost, battery size. But yeah, Sergio, what was it that Jim had said when you met with him?
Yeah, so Jim, when we asked him about, going with bigger batteries in the Fords and, longer range, he made a good point. And he said, if my bladder can't go for that long, he's like, so I'm thinking that when it comes to range, it should be based on how long can you sit, how long can you hold it, how long before your kids need to get out the car, how long before this, because Otherwise, you're making frivolous stops. When it comes to an EV, you're stopping on a road trip and you're not charging. To me, it's kind of frivolous. Like you're wasting time because it makes sense that you stop, you charge, you use the restroom, you eat, you drink, you whatever you want to do. But when you're forced to stop because your body can't go anymore, like it happened to me, and it was rough because it's like I sat there and I was like, I'm wasting time. Like if I could have held this till I got to the next charger, I could have been productive. And so Jim mentioned that. He's just like, why? He's like, people are not going to be able to hold it for that long. Families are not going to be holding it for that long. And it makes point. I mean, when you're younger and you can do it, absolutely. But as you get older, yeah, you're not holding it that long.
Well, one
I
thing
think
I want to
some
make a point at too with this is the fact that it's a truck. Now, on a car, I would understand that and I would agree, but this is a truck. So the other aspect of it is if I'm hauling a boat every day, or if I have a small yard trailer that I take with me that has about 5 or 6 thousand pounds, now you get to the point to where, I think we had somebody on the podcast that just bought a brand new GMC. The following day, he took a dual axle Airstream and he was able to get, I think he said 275 miles per charge on
It's
that
the same.
GMC.
It's the same framework, pretty much exactly as the
Yeah.
Silverado that you're driving.
200 kilowatt batteries, things like that. So, as a work truck, or if you use it to pull with, which I think all trucks need to be, that, yes, I agree with you. Don't need 450 because my bladder ain't going to make it, but I do need 450 so I can have a 250 range when I'm pulling stuff if I work with my truck. And I think that's the difference. For a car, I think 350 is fantastic. But if you're using that truck and you're pulling things, that's where I want to have my truck to have that higher numbers, and why I like the Chevy. I'm still a Ford guy, but man, riding in that Chevy was fantastic.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, I mean, the consideration that I think there's a need for both. If you want an EV that's going to be able to tow distance and, not be a limiting factor, you cannot take Chris's truck and haul a boat from California to Virginia. You would be miserable and it would be very impossible to do. Taking the Chevy
maybe an
Silverado,
inflatable dinghy, maybe
yeah.
an inflatable dinghy that I can throw into my bed. That's it.
The fact that you
It-
could put a boat on the back of Sergio's truck and get more range than Chris gets, on the interstate, as it sits without a boat, that's where that niche actually makes a lot of sense. But the Jim's point with the efficiency for the average driver, I don't average pull anything. I don't ever tow. And so for me to take my truck on a location, I don't need a 450-mile range. But if I had that consideration that I needed to tow, it is something to consider. Because the other side of that coin, and I mentioned it at the end of the trip review, is I was breaking down the efficiency because of the extra weight and because of the efficiency of the Silverado itself. I mean, the 1.7 and the size of that battery pack. We got a free charge when we were at Power, but I mean, Sergio, I'm sure you experienced this on your road trip. EA tends to be a little cheaper, but some of these charging stations, we stopped at a Pilot charging state, Pilot's new covered nice EV charging station, but it was charging 60 cents a kilowatt. And out in California, I'm sure it's worse.
So
But
it's funny you mentioned that. My trip down I-5, I've already looked at all my Tesla stops. 60 cents a kilowatt is exactly what it is, all the
that
way down I-5.
Silverado, we took it, for the 5 hour road trip. It was like 300 miles exactly. It would have cost $110 to fill it up there to then drive back. And if I had to publicly charge and I didn't charge at home, it would have been a $200 fueling road trip without towing. And, obviously charging at home, it's only like $18 to fill up. So much more cost efficient to fill up from your house. But in a world where you have to fill up that large of a battery, that charging session that I did, we filled in 179 kilowatts. And so like that's a mass, like our battery in the Lightning, we're averaging a fill of like, 80 to 100. And so the efficiency difference does make a huge difference when you're coming to a road trip like that. And if you're towing and getting every 200 miles, it can add up pretty quickly if you're using costly charging infrastructure. Luckily, EA tends to have some better charging rates to make it a little bit more affordable, but maybe you can speak into that, taking across the nation, what you saw to be like cost wise, the average stop for you.
Yeah, no, and you hit the nail on the head when it comes to charging and the pricing. Like Chris mentions, that 60 cents for some of them. The cool thing is with EA, I get a discount through Lyft. So as far as that goes, I think I'm paying like 30 something cents sometimes. So it's really cheap for me. But with when you guys mentioned about towing, and I'm sure you guys know this, like with my Lightning, I towed my trailer, my 37-foot 9,000 pound trailer from Florida all the way to Monterey. So and that was the Platinum. So you're talking about 300 miles is range without towing, and the furthest I was able to get with that towing was 130 miles, because that trailer was just so heavy.
It's a
The
long road.
furthest I got, what's that?
That's a long road trip.
It was a very long road trip. And so I took that same trailer from Monterey out here to Norfolk, Virginia with the Cybertrucks, and the highest miles I got was 120. So
Wow.
it was rough coming to Virginia with that trailer. But was able to make it. So when it comes to towing, Jesse, 100%. I haven't had a chance to tow with the Silverado yet, only because it's been in the shop, but I do want to see what it's going to do with my 9,000 pound trailer. I want to see how good it's going to, drag it. I'm going to try to maybe make a trip down to Florida with it. Just try to do something within, a few hundred miles just to see what this thing can actually do.
Well, and the other
We'll
But
thing is
on to review
cost.
that whenever that takes place, because I mean we wanted to do it with ours, but it was a loaner and we didn't have a load to put on it.
Other
But
than Josh himself. So
yeah,
that's
and
fair. I
cost
mean,
and
I'm
and
almost
cost
a nine
wise,
thousand pound trailer, so
yeah, and then the cost wise, it's like you're right. That makes a huge difference as well. But a lot of the RV parks will allow you to charge your trailers, I mean your car while you're there. Some of them now are putting up signs talking about you can't charge electric while you're there. So both all my trips, I was able to charge at the RV parks. The KOAs, they were fine with it, and a matter of fact, they were all excited to see the Cybertrucks pull in with the trailer and be just to stay there. But the overall cost, yeah, it's a much bigger hit when you have to stop and charge a Silverado anywhere. Um, I have my adapter. I ordered it November 4th. I got it a couple weeks ago. I mean, Chevy, shockingly, it took them 2 weeks to get my adapter from the NAX adapter. And
and half the
so
Ford drivers are still sitting there, on their rocking chair on their front porch waiting for the UPS man to show up.
yeah, exactly. I'm still waiting for mine for the Mach-E, and I got the Mach-E before this. So and I ordered that one back in June, and I'm still waiting for the one for the Mach-E. So yeah, but I think Ford actually pumped out a lot of them because they offered it for free, opposed to GM. They charged you the 200 and something dollars, but because I bought the truck and I had some credits from something else, it cost me $20. So that's the only reason I bought one. I was like, for $20, I'll get an extra one, throw it in the truck. But no, just driving this thing, it's a huge difference from all the other vehicles that I've ever owned. I mean, from the Lightning to the Cybertruck to, I mean, it's an interesting vehicle.
which one you like best?
Ooh, I knew that question was going to come out. So honestly, I will say that this truck, the Silverado, has amazing potential. It has it has the potential to beat all the others. I could tell you that I enjoy the range. I enjoy Super Cruise on this thing. The Super Cruise on here, the automatic lane changes, it kept you in the lane centered nice and tight. It didn't do all kinds of randomness. Very confident in its moves. I really enjoy Super Cruise on this truck. I enjoy the four-wheel steering on it. I enjoy quite a bit on this truck. So I think this is my number one pick right now.
Let me
But
ask you about
but the
the super
issues.
about the Super Cruise. So you have the newest Blue Cruise, right, on your Mach-E, where it's got the lane change. Now I know the Lightning will not let you do Blue Cruise when you're towing, so I know that's a big difference. But comparing the two, the Super Cruise to Blue Cruise, what is the difference? You're very complimentary, and you've been in Blue Cruise, so what's the difference there?
So Ford is going to release in its next 2025, they're going to do their Blue Cruise where it does auto lane change without driver initiation. So right now in the latest Blue Cruise 1.3, you have to turn on the blinker in order to make the car switch lanes. Super Cruise, it will switch lanes for you. So it'll cruise in the center lane. If a car is coming up and it's going slower, it'll switch to the left or right. It'll switch around them. It'll get back out of that lane. It'll do everything for you. So you don't have to touch anything. Opposed to with 1.3 on Blue Cruise, I am actually having to touch that stock and tell it, move over, get out of that lane, and then it will do it once it's safe.
From the Lightning that has 1.0 or whatever that is, moving over to the Super Cruise that the Silverado provided, it was night and day. I mean, I spent a lot of time just talking about how, like, because even with like the Blue Cruise, it was a lot of ping ponging. And I mean, I think our 22s at Lightnings only have 1.0. Like, it's like the very rudimentary version, but we're ping ponging all over the lanes. I'm always like steering it, like making sure that it does right. And I'm going on a turn and it'll randomly like disengage because it's too sharp of a turn. Like, I don't have a lot of confidence in Blue Cruise. It's a huge asset. I like having it, but like, I'm not going to pay $600 a year or whatever that the Ford wanted to retail Blue Cruise for. But Super Cruise, with its functionality, like, I felt like it was in control of the vehicle, knew where it wanted to be in the lane. It warmed, it vibrated the seats. Like, I'm going to change lanes now.
Yeah.
It read, said it's clear, it changed lanes, it moves you back over, it keeps you going. The only issue I had, and I couldn't figure this out, maybe I just didn't mess with the settings correctly. Does it auto recognize speed limit signs and change your speed?
I believe it does. I believe it does because I did have it. I had it to automatically do speed limits, but I haven't had my truck for like 2
Blue
months.
Cruise
So
does that for sure.
yeah.
But
But
with the
see,
Super Cruise, I couldn't get it to recognize the signs. And I was looking in the settings. Some of the settings in the Silverado were a little bit confusing. Like, in the
yeah,
Silverado, I could never find a good efficiency screen. Like, what's the miles per kilowatt? I had to go into one specific screen on the main console to get to it. You know, with the Lightning, it's trip counters and you can get efficiency counters. I couldn't get a trip monitor to even measure miles on the main the dash. And so it was interesting, some of the functionality within the screens to measure those type of variables. But the other variable, I never could figure out how to get the speed sign recognition, which makes a difference, because if you are hands-free and not super paying attention and the speed limit changes and you're just happily trucking, it's changing lanes, but you're going 20 miles over the speed limit, that does make a difference.
I think it does.
Not for me.
I think it does. I'll double check and I'll circle back to you on that one. But yeah, you're right. The user friendliness of this system sucks. Like, you do have to really pay attention and study and almost have a PhD to figure out a lot of the uses for this thing. I will say, Blue Cruise, I didn't have the ping ponging effect like that, so I can't speak to that portion of it. But I could say that Blue Cruise, especially in the 1.3, is definitely confident. I like the way it moves over, like if you're passing a semi, to give you some buffer and space in there. It's definitely much more advanced than 1.0 was. But Super Cruise does disengage in some random spots that I don't understand. So like before some of the bridges out here in Virginia, it'll disengage right before the bridge. I'll get up over the bridge and then it will re-engage. But it's like, it's still a straightaway. There's no curves. But what I don't like about it is when it disengages. Blue Cruise will still keep your lane centering going on for you when it disengages. This thing will just say you're on your own. And it's like, if you're not paying attention,
Drive off
the road. Jenkins.
Yeah. Yeah,
Now,
some of the interesting oddities, like not having Apple CarPlay was, like a negative. I couldn't get good phone integration. I wanted to like be able to push something in my maps and it spits it up to the car console. You had to manually type in your GPS outputs, and it doesn't have to have CarPlay to have that, but the phone integration wasn't there at all. And I was in demo mode, so I wasn't sure how much was demo mode versus fully active mode. So it was some of those interesting nuances that I was curious your experience overall with the tech.
Yeah, if you pull up Google Maps and you search for a location, you could actually have it send it to your truck. So it'll automatically send it to my truck. So once I get in the truck, I can then navigate. So kind of like Tesla or even like Ford Trip Planner, like you can send it through Google Maps.
I think
I
that
have
was
to
a
do it.
limiting factor because I was in demo mode because I tried that and it wasn't working, but I bet you because you have to register the vehicle first.
Were you
Yeah.
in Google Maps though, Josh, or were you in Apple Maps?
I was in Google.
Google.
Oh, okay.
Then
With
I
that,
would hit start and I was just sitting there on Google Maps on my phone and like it wouldn't communicate with the
it
vehicle.
wouldn't send it.
I either had to drive, watching the GPS of my vehicle, or I had to punch the address in to the vehicle, but you can't punch it in while driving. So
No.
you had to tell it, and it wouldn't pick up the right address, or you had to stop and punch it in. And so
Now, I do hate that. I
Yeah.
hate that because with Ford, if you have a passenger in here, you could say override and bypass because you have a passenger. But in this thing, it doesn't care if you have passengers or not. You're not typing on this navigation when you're driving.
Does it have Tesla supercharging in the navigation, Sergio? Because that is one of my biggest pet peeves, is that I'm literally by hand figuring out my mapping, because there is no Tesla supercharging in any of the Ford screens. Android Auto's got an update, but it hasn't pushed to my truck. Shout out Ford, please push the update to us.
Well,
I
I'm looking at my charging stations in the area right now, and for me, all I'm seeing is Electrify America and EV Go. I mean for the area that I'm in right now, but if I don't see anything in here for Tesla. I haven't played with it enough. Like I said, I
Yeah.
just got my truck back last week from not having it for like 2 months and some change. So there's a lot of things that I've forgotten about and can't remember what it does, but yeah.
Shout out Rivian for really getting that one right, man. Rivian's got it integrated well. It's got the pricing on the screen. They all showed up when I mean, for whatever reason, Rivian really was able to nail it in a way that, you know,
Have
almost.
you not have you not done it with Ford with Charge Assist?
Yeah, but charge assist you can't use while you're driving and you can't voice command it. And even if you charge assist it, it's not going to let you precondition it and it's not going to recognize it as a stop, even if you add it as a stop from charge assist. So when I'm
Yeah.
on my trip down to Southern California and I'm like, hey, I want to hit up Harris Ranch and Tejon, like it doesn't recognize that those are stops. It doesn't precondition my battery.
I found that with
So
Apple Maps, with Google Maps, all of them, they overstop me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to
Yeah.
push it to the limit. I want to arrive to that charging station with 5%,
Same.
and I want
Same.
yep.
to be able to stop and get a full charge. The Apple Maps, the Google Maps, all of them like, yeah, stop at 30% and charge to
Yeah,
70.
no.
Go to the
No,
next
no,
stop.
yeah.
I'm like, no, I want to go the extra 150 miles to the next charging stop. And so most of the times I am manually planning my route out. I know my efficiency, is going to be
Same.
2 on my Lightning. And so
Yep.
I'm just going
Same.
to say, hey, I can get 260 miles. So as long as I'm 250 or less wherever I'm going, I know I'll get there. And so I personally like to map mine out unless the app would say like, how daring do you want to be on a scale of 1 to 10? Let me control that variable. Because I mean, yes, the charging infrastructure is spread out, but I know like if I'm driving to Nashville, I can get from my house to the Crossville charger, and so I'm not going to stop in Knoxville even though it wants me to. So
Well,
it is a bit of a gripe. They want me to stop on my way home, and I get home with 10% battery life. I'm like, let me get to my house and not stop an extra time, but it likes to overstop you.
Yep. I
that's
agree.
that is the group that I want to be a part of one day, man, is when they put a roundtable on navigation, because it is my white whale, bro. It makes me crazy. And it's like I don't get it. Like it's so obvious and it takes so long. And the only one I've seen that, Tesla does it pretty well where you can navigate on the screen, you can see all the options, you can delete and add, and it'll tell you like slow down to this speed if you want to make it. It'll tell you what your state of arrival is going to be. Very dynamic. Apple, when it suggests the charging, if you want to change it, it's like Apple's like a cat, bro. It gives no cares, man. It's like you want to no. It stares at you and you're like, can I change this? No.
No.
Like you will, yeah. And a better route planner does a lot of that. You can go into, but it's like using Unix, man. You got to go into layers of menus and be like, all right, I'm going to leave at this state of charge. I can set my arrival state of charge. And those are all cool, but the user interface is clunky. You got to have an OBD2 thing for it.
With the
for
amount of
whatever
data that's harvested by these companies, you'd figure that they could come up with
yes,
a system. Like, you can
yes.
imagine that somebody like Google knows the data of the average efficiency between point A and point B. And so they should be able to then predict your range based on your vehicle if they actually use the data correctly. But that's definitely something I think it needs improvement, because even to this day, I am not GPSing my destination. I'm GPSing my next charging station.
Yep, that's what I
Same.
do.
As long as I know I can get there, it's like, you might need to stop. No, I'm not. I know
No.
exactly where I'm going just
Yep.
to get to where I'm going.
Dude,
And
I
That,
for a new EV
that's me.
driver, that is a little bit confusing, and something that, is a little bit of a hindrance, if you will. But once you get the swing of your vehicle and you know the efficiency, you can understand the range better. And,
Yep.
sometimes your vehicle's range is all wonky. Like, if I drive around town for 3 weeks straight, I'll get in my truck on a road trip morning. It'll say I'm going to make it 350 miles. I know I'm going to get 260 in my truck. And so I go 250, get to my spot on fumes, or not fumes, on
Static. Static.
electrons.
No,
static, and
static. On static.
and then I plug up and get to my spot. So yeah, it's a tricky space, but yeah.
What's crazy for me is I get weirdly like weird enjoyment out of planning it, and I realized what it was on when I was going through and doing this recent road trip. What I really loved about it, because it's going from here to Southern California. There's a couple elevation changes. I've got to go over first the Altamont Pass, and then I've got to go over the Grapevine. And so as I'm planning all this out and looking at what I'm really going to get, and kind of getting some feedback from people on charging stops in the Tesla community, I'm realizing, what it reminded me of is I used to fly Cessnas. And when you're flying a Cessna, you got to understand what's your range, what's your wind, what's your elevation change. And as I'm planning it out, it reminded me of flight planning. And it was like it was almost like the same thing, It's like even if you were to put something into your GPS on an airplane, you still have to have a manual flight plan. And just like with an airplane, I have to have planned emergency bailout places, right? Like, oh, if I need to land it, if I have an emergency, where can I land? I need to know my airstrips. Same thing. Hey, my plan is to make it to hone, but what if I can't? What if the wind hits me? What if I can't go? I've got to have bailout spots as well.
Crosswind, the
It,
tailwind is a
yeah,
yeah.
you really do need to understand it, because the wind, for example, I can go from my house to Harris Ranch or Kettleman City, no problem. But on the way back, I can't, because the wind prevails north to south in California, and there's an elevation change. And so it's an interesting thing to look at all these little things. And then conversely, when I did my trip to Vegas, I had a wicked 24-mile-an-hour tailwind pushing me along, and I was going 75 miles an hour with 2.8 miles per kilowatt, and
Wow.
it went from I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. I may have to bail out at Henderson, to I arrived at the hotel with 28% battery. And that's just how dramatic the wind can be, especially on a brick like we're driving with the Silverado or the Lightning or those types of things. So it is interesting, like how nuanced, and so, especially when you now see, that's the thing with yours, Sergio. You have so much range, you don't have to worry about that as much. You've got so much more to play with. And,
Yeah.
and then also, interestingly for you, Sergio, correct me if I'm wrong, don't you have 800 volts on the Silverado? Yeah, and that's huge, right? Because with GM, whether it's the Equinox or whether it's our truck with the Lightnings, they're in the like 300s. Like, they call them 400 packs, but they're in reality, when I look at my actual voltage, especially if I'm on the low end of charge, I'm in like the mid to low 300s on my voltage, and that makes a difference, even if I have
Huge.
full 480 amps at that voltage compared to what you're doing. So what's your charge curve like so like on mine, it's not necessarily good for me to pull in at 2% because my pack voltage is so low. If I want to get the best charge curve, it's almost better to be a little bit higher. But with the Silverado at 800, are you getting huge charging on the low end of the pack?
Yeah, so from my experiences, this thing did not care. So I pulled in a couple times at 2%, 5%, and I was still able to pull that 360, 355 from Electrify America. The only thing with this truck, and I know that a lot of other people have talked about it in the forums as well, is if you turn on the evac system while you're charging, it takes a dip, it takes a hard hit, and it will not get its full potential when it comes to charging. I don't know what Chevy's doing to or GM is doing to take care of that bug, but I can tell you that that was the toughest situation for me is if it was hot where I was charging and I wanted to run the AC, the sucker would plummet all the way down to 39 kilowatts as far as
Wow.
speed. It
That's
was bad
crazy.
from 300 and something all the way to 39 if I turned on my AC. And I recorded it because I was just like, this is unbelievable. Like, how are you dipping that bad? So
That's
that
like a
was the
software issue. There's no way. I mean, that's insane. You think a slight reduction might make sense, but to go like to 10%,
yeah,
that's insane.
yeah.
So that's a good, as we kind of start to wrap up, that's a good kind of segue into some of the things. It hasn't been all rainbows and sunshine, right? You've had some obstacles along the way, and I think all of us have with our trucks. I mean, my truck's been in the shop more times than, like I told Josh, I think that I'm single-handedly responsible for them missing their quarterly numbers with my warranty claims. So, I'm not casting shade at all, man. This is just the reality of first gen trucks. Like, walk us
Yeah.
through and we've been through this with your Cybertruck, man. I mean, this happens when you're early, not just first gen, but you're early in the first gen. Like,
Yeah.
so what have you seen? What did you just get kind of
Yeah,
dealt
the
with
air
when you were?
suspension in Monterey that you mentioned, like over in California, but then you said when you got to Virginia, you had some issues. We didn't kind of get
Yeah.
Yeah. So the air suspension completely went kaplunk out here in Virginia. Like I said, it started out there and just went completely just done out here. Yeah, being an early adopter, there are expectations that you are going to have to deal through some bugs. You're going to be that guinea pig. You're going to be that guy experiencing or that lady experiencing the issues. I'm 100%. Like it comes with the territory of early adoption. And a lot of us want to have the first run of things. We want to be early adopters. We want to have the toys. I'm okay with that. Like there's certain things where I'm like, I get it. I'm here for it. Um, so this one they had to change out my leveling pump. The pump went bad. During their inspection, they ended up finding out that the rear drive unit was leaking. So I had some lines back there that were leaking. They ended up some coolant lines. They ended up pulling the rear drive unit, getting that cleaned up. Dealership did something, they won't admit to it, but ended up burning out the pump, some kind of pump that runs transmission fluid or some kind of fluid, some kind of oil. Ended up burning out that pump. So then the pump was on back order, which then took even more time to get to the shop. Then I had some trim pieces fly off while I was on my drive to Virginia from the roof. The door and the fender piece started popping out as well. Uh, let's see, what else did I have? I had another pump go bad. There was a couple pumps that went bad on this thing. So,
Do you have any
um,
badge problems? I've seen some people talk about the front badge had come loose on
oh,
theirs.
you know, I did see that where people's front badges were falling off even before they left the parking lot. I have yet, mine is on there nice and
Yours is
secure. So
good.
I haven't had the bow tie decide to fly off yet.
Maybe
But
they'll
I did
rivet it.
have the,
They'll rivet it like the pedal.
that's
oh
what
man,
the
don't do that to
Cybertruck
my,
model. Yeah.
yeah, I remember when my pedal came off. That was funny. But yeah, the roof ones, I saw people talking about those and those flew off on me. I had two of them fly off on the drive to Virginia. So, and then the one was loose and another one was fine. So they ended up fixing all three of them for me. But all in all, like I said, it was in the shop 2 months and some change for them to get all of this done. That's my only thing is a lot of for the early adoption, even with my Mustang and the Lightning and the Cybertruck, manufacturers, when they know that they have these vehicles, they're putting them out, they need to have parts readily accessible as well. Like, you might have some issues. Why am I having a back order on a piece for something that just came out? Like, what's going on? Like, you should have stock. You should have stock for these things because had all of that not happened, I would have had my truck back a lot sooner. That's my issue is I expect issues. I don't have a problem. If this battery was to fail, I'd say, oh, okay, early adoption. But have it available. Don't have me waiting almost 2 months to get my vehicle back because I'm
I
making a
had a
payment on this thing.
I,
It's not reasonable.
I had a deer with my Lightning right about 3-4 months after I got my truck, and I was one of the very first people to get the Lightning. I mean, we all were, and it I had my truck was in the shop for a month and a half because they couldn't. I ordered the parts until they tore it all apart, and when they tore it all apart, like there was one bracket that was on back order for like a month. And so they got like the headlight was like, they had that in stock, but that one bracket for this one spot, like it took a month, and like a little over a month to get it.
Yeah, see, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. Like that, why? Why?
Unique to the
Why?
Lightning, and they didn't have it. And so Ford, they were coordinating with Ford trying to get the part, but it took a little over a month. And so I was out of a truck for almost 2 months just because of that specific bracket being gone. And they gotten one part in, and it was broken. So then when they tried to reorder it, that was on back order. And so it was just, yeah, it was a mess. But yeah, parts is something, and that was right at, like in the COVID era, like right after as COVID was fading. So parts were a little bit more wonky. At that time too, but still, it's unexcusable if you're going to have any vehicle on the road, especially the new ones that could be more prone to issues and not have adequate parts on standby for anybody that might need it.
Well, you're actively manufacturing, so you have a whole manufacturing facility that has them. So what's the issue with saying, let's snag one from there? Let's do what we have to do to get this customer back on the road. Like, I just don't believe in having to have customers wait for
more cars though. So,
yeah.
On the opposite of that, Sergio, because we talked about you do have so many, you have been an early adopter with so many. Can you think to which one has been the most problem free? Which one have you had the least amount of issues with? Can you recall that?
Mach-E, my Mach-E, 100% the Mach-E. I could tell you, like, even my 2024 Mach-E right now, it has not been to the shop. I've not had to deal with anything with it. Like nothing. But yeah, I think out of all of them, the Mach-E has been the most solid. Not my first edition. My first edition did have some issues. I got that one in February. The one that I got in October of 2021, that one was also not as problematic as the first one. But this 2024 that I have, like
dialed in.
Yeah. You know what? That one and my 2023 Model 3. My 2023 Model 3, standard range, zero issues with that thing. And I use it on Turo. Like, people rent that thing out, they bring it back. I'll drive it in between sometimes just to see how everything's going. I haven't even changed wipers on that thing. It's like it still smells new. I haven't changed a air filter in it. Like, I mean, I haven't done nothing to that car. Like, that one in the Mach-E.
Yeah, nice. And I think that just shows that as the generations iterate, they get their stuff dialed in. In both of those cases, that's not the first gen of that platform. And so I think that is what I think we're going to find with all these trucks eventually too. They're going to get it dialed in, I'm sure.
For me, my eyes are set on the GMC truck. I mean, it's like Silverado, but it's basically the same thing, but I think a little bit different fit and finish. But for me, I think I'm just going to let it simmer through the first year model. Let the second iterations come out, let the prices start to drop a little bit, because another thing you see is all these vehicles come out at MSRP of higher values, but then within a year, the deals that they're slapping on these things are pretty significant. So, that $95,000 Sierra EV, I probably can get for 80 in a year. And so that's where just let it simmer a little bit, let them work out some of the kinks, and then I'll nab a better deal on the same truck in a year.
People are rolling off the lots with high $50,000 Lariats right now with 0% 72 months, and I'm like, oh, so tempted. I'm like, hold, just pay off the truck and get the next man. I'm waiting for the next.
Look how beautiful this Silverado is. Like, look at
the
that.
front end of that is nice.
And I love
you think it's pretty, right? Isn't that beautiful? Look at it. Thank you.
He's like, don't mess with me.
I love the light bar. The light bar stands out. The Lightning light bar, I just grieve with it.
Big miss on the Lightning light bar.
It's just
they should made it brighter.
It looks so tough at night, and then during the day, you don't even know I have a light bar.
Did it come with that tonneau? Is that tonneau?
Yeah,
did it come with it?
Yeah, they all come with this tonneau, but I'll tell you, I said that the Ford should have came with one as well, but this cheap little Velcroed on, I had to tighten this thing up. I don't know how many times on the road trip where I had to pull it out and stretch it out and reapply it, because it just starts to flap in the wind, and the wind will rip it off, and then you're having to fix it. So it's a pain in the butt.
Hard shell or bust for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that opportunity to shout out Worksport AL3, one of my sponsors. We'll leave a link down in the description. If you're needing a tonneau, Black Friday sales right now, they go from $199 to $680. Click. Hook it
Well-
up. We'll get you sorted, man, with that tonneau situation.
Well, thank you,
And it's
sir,
got a
for sharing your experience with us. Obviously, you're our EV knowledge guy. If there's a vehicle that we need to learn more about, we're gonna contact you because I'm sure you have it in your garage.
you got it.
Let me know. I mean, if I need to buy it, let me know as well, because I'm always looking for an excuse to buy a new car.
Get the Scout EV on order because I want
Yes.
I want to spin around in that one. So
Say
Yep.
less.
yeah,
Yeah.
I might know somebody. I might know somebody.
That is
Yeah.
great.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Turn Down for What. Tune in next week for more EV news and updates.
Thanks for tuning in to Turn Down for What. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on to tune in to more EV news and updates. See you next time.